You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io. You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io.
You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io.
We're back. This is the Peter Ryan Report, episode 2 on CoinSpice, and we're back with the executive producer of Rizky Presents Blockchain, which is on Amazon Prime right now. A really cool 6-part documentary. He's a pundit, a bit of an armchair philosopher, and someone that we in the CoinSpice world really look to kind of set our head straights here. And today, or this particular episode rather, we're going to talk about crypto worldviews and how that shakes out within the space. And maybe as a listener, you've noticed this or you haven't. There are people that claim certain mantles, and Peter's a real keen observer, so he'll give us some insight there. Let's well, again, thanks again, man, for coming on.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me on. And armchair philosopher is a great title.
There it is. You've been a little under the weather. Are you feeling better now?
Yes, I am feeling better, but at least now I have an excuse for any bad take that I have.
Boom. So if he says anything out of character, he can blame it on some ill health here. All right. So crypto worldviews. Break it down for us. I believe David Gerard, blockchain crypto critic of some note, from the UK, circa Australia. We're all right-wing nut jobs. Other people see it as crypto anarchists, a la Timothy May. How do you kind of see crypto? How do you see the crypto worldviews breaking down? Give us some of the camps.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily disagree with some of these, let's say, insults or derogatory comments that a lot of mainstream media figures like Gerard might make, or there's been some other pundits out there that have talked about how right-wing crypto is in a very negative way. And why I say I don't necessarily disagree is because, in general parlance, the common language that we're all sort of talking about, the libertarianism, the anarcho-capitalism that has really built the foundation of what Bitcoin and the wider crypto world is, that is generally right-wing. And so ultimately, the real debate is not, is it right-wing or is it not? It's, do you view the right wing as good or bad? And we can split hairs about, neocons and social conservatives and libertarians and how it all breaks down. But, in general, crypto Twitter, not crypto Twitter, but, well, yes, crypto Twitter too, but the crypto industry in general, it started with this anarchist cypherpunk grouping, and then really emerged out into the periphery of these libertarians that were looking for alternative forms of currencies. And so what Bitcoin did was it presented an oppositional force to the Fed. You had, 2008, 2009, Bitcoin just beginning, just birthing out of non-existence. And what was also one of the, life-affirming events that was going on during that time period. The Ron Paul revolution was going on, and one of the biggest chants was end the Fed. And sadly, Ron Paul is not the president, and there's still a Federal Reserve, but all those disaffected, Ron Paulers, I'm sure, and I've talked to a number of people that have a very visceral experience of going from that disappointment of not being able to elect Ron Paul into seeing Bitcoin as the real alternative, and almost an agorist alternative, in that we are no longer negotiating with the state. We are fully circumventing it by adopting this technology that nullifies it. And so that's when you started to see the libertarians really come around and say, this is the currency of our movement. This is what we need to get on board with. This is the best path we have at actually getting the Fed out of the business of catering our monetary policy and all the ill effects of that goes downstream and creates all the policies that we don't like, from the endless wars in the Middle East that are funded by this, from the economic boom and bust cycles that happen through the artificial credit creation that cycles down into the political cronies that get it first and then are able to actually extract value out from the whole populace until the money fully distributes through the economy and ultimately inflates everyone else's value away. So this was what libertarians bit their teeth into and why they got onto the Bitcoin bandwagon so hard. And so this is certainly why I became infatuated with Bitcoin back in the day. And as we move forward, we actually start to see this change. Once Bitcoin grows up a little bit, once it starts to get a higher price and starts going through puberty and people start noticing it, then we start to see people that are coming in that are not necessarily of that mindset. And so you could really look at potentially, let's say 2015 to 2017 as this introduction of a new wave of crypto people. These are necessarily not people that came from libertarianism and saw Bitcoin as the tool to enable the goals they wanted with that. But these are perhaps people that saw a profit motive, saw a cool new app, saw an interesting community to join, whatever their rationale was. But they weren't infatuated with the same things as sort of the founding stock. And so when they came in, perhaps they became libertarians after, but that's also a distinction. Did you become a libertarian after getting into Bitcoin, or did you get into Bitcoin because you were a libertarian? And so
that's a great way to focus it. And don't lose your train of thought there. Is Vitalik Buterin then a real nice example of something that closely threads what you're talking about? So he comes out of the proto-libertarian Peter Thiel camp, kind of gets the genius imprimatur there, attempts something like interaction with Core, bounces in disgust, starts Ethereum, and then he's still a relatively young guy. He's embracing radical markets and radical change, and he'll just as soon throw up a David Friedman, anarcho-capitalist machinery of freedom quote, as he will say something a little bit more progressive-oriented, left-leaning. And so if you want to find kind of and I'm painting with broad strokes here, but I want you to correct me or tell me where I'm right, you'll find a lot of the left-leaning folk moving the progressive, sort of the lovable old socialists, moving towards Ethereum. And kind of like a Rorschach test, putting on to Ethereum all their hopes and dreams, whether it's democratizing things or all these sorts of things. Am I right there, or where did I go wrong?
Yeah, I think you're definitely right, and I don't want to pigeonhole Vitalik because I think he has a unique viewpoint, and I think he genuinely trying to experiment and find the best solution as he sees fit by looking into alternative ideologies, especially some of the innovative stuff that you mentioned with radical markets. But if I'm allowed to pigeonhole him just a little bit, it seems that, you mentioned Peter Thiel and his genesis out of that. It seems that Vitalik embodies that Silicon Valley almost libertarian, but libertarian from the standpoint of utilitarianism, of finding what works in terms of enabling the progressive ends through market means. This sort of thing, you can, when I think about this, I think about the sort of the Sam Harris individualism, that Peter Thiel technocracy, that about how all these things come together. And so that's how I view Vitalik. And like I said, he's definitely more open to some of these more progressive ideas. And I think then that is a good way to use him as an avatar for the Ethereum community in general, because when you look at them, and being that, Ethereum started after Bitcoin, these were a different subset of people coming in for not the same reasons, because what was the value prop of Ethereum? We are going to create a computer that everyone's going to use, and you're going to build all these decentralized applications on it, and you're going to use Ether as a fuel to make all this happen. And so we started getting away from store value, median of exchange, unit of account, inflation, supply caps, all this type of stuff. Suddenly we're in this new world of application development and unlimited computing power going forward, and connecting the world through decentralized services.
And it's a radical shift. I mean, from the beginning to where Vitalik goes off, because I was at Comic-Con last year, I think it was, and I was with another news desk, and I was interviewing some of Joe Lubin's crew at Consensus, which was at the time, it still is, but a giant Ethereum based. He was obviously a co-founder of Ethereum, company that had these spokes and thousands of employees and so on. And when I talked to them, there was absolutely no discussion of peer-to-peer electronic cash, banking the unbanked. It was blockchain this, blockchain that. How do we get more women in the space? There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying it was a completely different emphasis.
Exactly, and that's the key word there. It's what does your community emphasize, and how do those worldviews shape the direction of the software that you're building and the companies you're forming. And so you can even take Joe Lubin's Consensus as, they have a lot of market share in the space in terms of the clout as a thought leader organization, and just as a, number of developers, number of projects they're involved in. And where's their headquarters? Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
With all the hipsters and the beards and all that stuff.
Exactly. So it's almost, we don't have to talk any further than that to kind of embody who the archetype of ETH developer is. And I'm not trying to throw any pejoratives out, but just saying that is the type of person and the type of worldview that goes along with that. And whereas, you look at the archetype of, let's say, a Bitcoin Cash developer, right, or person in the space, and they're most likely someone living in New Hampshire in the Free State Project, working on how you best send cash anonymously.
Weed cures cancer, bro.
Exactly, they're all curing cancer. That's the point we want to emphasize.
But I mean, I was making fun of the Ethereum folk. I gotta tease our guys too. But you're exactly right. And I think for noobs, they have no idea how stark and different these two camps are. They overlap for sure, but there's a completely different emphasis.
Exactly, and even just throwing some data out there. So in general, and I looked at this when I was a researcher with CoinDesk this past year. The industry in general breaks down in terms of a 52% right wing and 45% left wing and 3% other. So you can see that we're still like majority right wing, and you could imagine that in the past that was a larger share. But we're really starting to see this left wing influence, and even when we look at by year, 2017 was this big adoption year because everyone that got in because of the price was going up so much. And so we see within that, that's where a lot of these people that identify as liberal or identify as centrist or socialist potentially have come in. And again, they kind of found themselves going through this trapdoor of like, hey, I just want to make a couple extra % return. And all of a sudden, people are throwing human action and, economics in one lesson at me. And, I didn't sign up for this. So those people had an awakening in terms of what are the underlying philosophies that are pushing this all forward. And ultimately, over time, we've segregated into the coin community that best represents the values that we see and the goals that we want to get to.
You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io. You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io.
You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io.